Hey, what's up, guys? Yeah, it was a pretty brutal weekend of videos going over the Dresden firebombing. One of my watchers, thank you, unfortunately, informed me that Mr. Goodrich had passed away in December, early December of 2024. He had a stroke, I believe, in October. Um, yeah, and I just want to say the books he wrote. These are the two I've read. I know he did one, the Lincoln assassination book, one on what the Confederacy went through after the war, the one on the Indian atrocities. Yeah, Mr. Gervis didn't pull any punches, man. But I just want to basically say rest in peace to this man. These books were really important. A lot of stuff which had not really been put in a way, I guess, for written for like the average person. Now, of course, to get he was slotted, I guess, in a certain area, but he didn't give it, a certain area of ideology, which was really not the case if you read his work. Whatever. Uh, just, I just want to say rest in peace. And this is what it is. This stuff will always, what he wrote will live on. And a lot of people, this has opened a lot of people's eyes to certain things about the past. Okay? Always the war. I know people are probably sick of me saying that, but I won't ever stop saying that. And it's not even just a faint thing that has no bearing in this day and age. Everything you go through, everything that happens, all the bullshit that you hear, all the lies you hear, said by but even by the people you think are good for you. Right? It all comes from this time. So, anyway, rest in peace, Mr. Goodrich. I always like this. And I remember he had done, there was a video of him saying this. This book is about crime and the evil things evil men do. This book is about words and hate and the powerful price of propaganda. This book is about the savage no-quarter war waged against Japan during the summer of 45, and it is about the equally savage no-quarter peace waged against Germany during the same summer. There is no attempt herein to recite the numerous atrocities attributed to the Germans and the Japanese by the victorious powers. Certainly some of these crimes were true. Equally certain many of these crimes were not, such as winning and losing, right? Such as war, right? Winner is king, loser the thief. To most modern readers, the unique guilt of attributed to the Axis powers in starting World War II, as well as their supposed barbaric behavior in prosecuting it, are too well known to repeat. For those who wish to learn more of the victor's version of the war, a simple trip to the bookstore, library, the viewing of virtually any feature-length movie or documentary film will offer up the Allied account of the war. Right. 98% of what you want is out there if that's what you want. This book is instead devoted to the inhuman treatment and savage atrocities directed at the losers of the war by the winners. Both during and after that war, this book is about the evil things evil men do. The kamikazes, right? How lonely is the sound of the clock in the darkness of the night, revealed another pilot before his death. Some like 22-year-old Ryuhu Yohara, only hours away from his own final mission, was one of those who actually welcomed death, but not for the reasons many American sailors might have imagined. When the woman from whom I cared so dearly passed away, I emotionally died with her, said the young pilot. The idea that she waits for me in heaven, where we will be reunited, makes death not particularly frightening for me, since it happens only on my way to heaven. In some cases, to avoid such painful separation as the above, young women, their love for their sweethearts greater than their fear of death, in some cases were allowed to join pilots on their last flights. I didn't know that. Such was the case with Asako, the new bride of Second Lieutenant Tetsuo Tanafuji, and many other Japanese patriots like the American Revolutionary hero Nathan Hale, who regretted that he only had one life to give for his country, undoubtedly felt the same. I wish that I could be born 7 times, each time to smite the enemy, announced 23-year-old Isayo Matsuo to his parents, just before he seated himself in his cockpit. But virtually every kamikaze pilot who climbed into his aircraft for the final flight, Isaya Matsuo included, longed to live for all the same reasons other humans long to live. In the first and last letter to my beloved child, Lieutenant Sanihisa Yamura wrote his final farewell to his infant daughter, Motoko. You have often looked and smiled at my face. You also slept in my arms and we took baths together. When you grow up and want to know about me, ask your mother and Aunt Kayo. My photo album has been left for you at home. I gave you the name Motoko hoping you would be a gentle, tender-hearted, and caring person. I want to make sure you are happy when you grow up and become a splendid bride, and even though I die without you knowing me, you must never feel sad. When you grow up and want to meet me, please come to Kudan, shrine to the military dead, and if you pray deeply, surely your father's face will show itself within your heart. I believe you are happy. Since your birth, you started to show a close resemblance to me, and other people would often say that when they saw a little Motoko, they felt like they were meeting me. Your uncle and aunt will take good care of you, with you being their only hope, and your mother will only survive by keeping in mind your happiness throughout your entire lifetime. Even though something happens to me, you must certainly not think of yourself as a child without a father. I am always protecting you. Please be a person who takes loving care of others. When you grow up and begin to think about me, please read this letter, Motoko. P.S. In my airplane, I keep as a charm a doll you had as a toy when you were born, so it means Motoko was together with father. I tell you this because my being here without you knowing makes my heart ache. Resigned to his fate, caught up in a war not of his choosing, one young man penned a final and simple farewell to his mother, then went bravely to his death. I will be content with beautiful white clouds in the skies as a grave marker, he wrote. Now I go to die for the emperor and for the mountains and rivers of my beloved Japan. In the British zone, a journalist stumbled upon the aftermath of yet another interrogation. I'm afraid the prisoners don't look exactly nice, laughed the captain in charge. Crumpled on the floor, laying in pools of blood, the newsmen saw several German prisoners moaning. When they were ordered to stand to attention for the guests, slowly all made the painful attempt. The first man to rise stood on uncertain legs and leaned against a wall for support. Then, his body shaking, the man made a reflexive motion with his arms as if to fend off blows. Others with difficulty eventually managed to stand swaying against the wall. "Come off the wall!" shouted a British sergeant. Unsteadily, the beaten, bleeding men did just as told. In a nearby cell, the medical officer had just finished his examination of a German, and on the floor lay the victim drenched in his own blood. "Up!" shouted the medical officer to the man when the visitor entered. "Get up!" Painfully using the arms of a chair, the victim tried to rise, but could not. Again he was ordered to get up. This time on weak, shaky legs, the man succeeded. "Why don't you kill me off?" moaned the victim as he stretched his arms, pleading to the men. The dirty bastard is jabbering this all morning," the sergeant nearby growled. Alone, surrounded by sadistic hate, utterly bereft of law, justice, or hope, many victims understandably escaped in the only way they could, by taking their own lives. Like rays of sun in a black world of ugliness and evil, however, miracles did occur. As guards led him back to his prison cell on painfully weakened legs, one Wehrmacht officer reflected on the insults, beatings, and tortures he had endured and contemplated suicide. I could not see properly in the semi-darkness and missed my open cell door. A kick in the back and I was sprawling on the floor. As I raised myself, I said to myself, I should not accept this humiliation. I sat on my bunk. I had hidden a razor blade that would serve to open my veins. Then I looked at the New Testament and found these words in the Gospel of St. John. "Without me, ye can do nothing." With those simple yet profound words, and despite the terrible pain and agony the suffering soldier felt, something stirred within himself, something he had not felt for a long time. His body beaten, bloody, broken, but his soul untouched, unharmed, unshakable. New strength seemed to rise in me. I was pondering over what seemed to me a miracle when the heavy lock turned in the cell door. A very young American soldier came in. He put his fingers to his lips to warn me not to speak. "I saw it," he said. "Here are baked potatoes." He pulled the potatoes out of his pocket and gave them to me, and then went out, locking the door behind him. Wow. Yeah, you can imagine. It's like, what? This isn't what I thought I was fighting for. Right, now this is when you had all the Russian prisoners, some who had fought for the Germans, Cossacks and others, and even just ones who were just prisoners. Right, and as an American, when the screening began, I had little sympathy for these Russians in their battered German uniforms, wrote William Sloane Coffin Jr., who acted as a translator for several colonels who interrogated the prisoners. But as the colonels, eager to establish their cover and satisfy their curiosity, encouraged the Russians to tell their personal histories, I began to understand the dilemma the men had faced. They spoke not only of the cruelties of collectivization in the 30s, but of arrests, shootings, and wholesale deportations of families. Many of these men had spent time in Soviet jails. Soon my own interest was so aroused that I began to spend evenings in the camp hearing more and more tales of arrest and torture. Hearing the personal histories of those who had joined Vladislav's army made me increasingly uncomfortable with the words traitor and deserter as applied to these men. Maybe Stalin's regime was worthy of desertion and betrayal. Explained a Russian prisoner, one of thousands captured by the Germans who joined General Vladisław rather than starve in a POW camp. "You think, Captain, that we sold ourselves to the Germans for a piece of bread? Tell me, why did the Soviet government forsake us? Why did it forsake millions of prisoners? We saw prisoners of all nationalities and they were taken care of. Through the Red Cross they received parcels and letters from home. Only the Russians received nothing. In Kassel I saw American Negro prisoners and they shared their cakes and chocolates with us. Then why didn't the Soviet government, which we considered our own, send at least some plain hardtack? Hadn't we fought? Hadn't we defended the government? Hadn't we fought for our country? If Stalin refused to have anything to do with us, we didn't want to have anything to do with Stalin. I lost, so I remained a traitor," conceded Vladisław himself, who, though he might easily have saved himself, chose instead to share the fate of his men. As the Russian general reminded his captors, however, if he was a traitor for seeking foreign aid to liberate his land, then so in their own day were George Washington and Benjamin Franklin. Despite the Geneva Convention, despite the strong likelihood that returnees would be massacred, General Eisenhower and other top leaders were determined that Russian repatriation would be carried out to the letter. Terrible portents of what lay ahead had come out even before the war was over. When the British government prepared to return from England thousands of Soviets in the winter of 44-45, many prisoners attempted suicide or tried to escape. Once the wretched cargo was finally forced onto ships, heavy guards were posted to prevent the prisoners from leaping overboard. Upon reaching Russian ports, few British seamen could doubt the fate of their charges once they were marched out of sight by the NKVD. At Odessa on the Black Sea, noisy aircraft soon appeared and circled tightly over the docks, while loud sawmills joined the chorus to drown the sounds of screams and gunfire echoing from the warehouses. Within half an hour, the airplanes flew away, the sawmill shut down, and all was quiet again. A similar scenario was played out when 4,000 Soviets were forcibly repatriated from the United States. Man, this is rough. The roundups and repatriations continued across Europe until eventually over 5 million Soviet citizens had been delivered to slavery, torture, and death. However, if the Allies expected to enamor Stalin by their actions, they were mistaken. In fact, quite the opposite occurred. Rightly regarding the repatriations as a Western betrayal of its natural allies, the Red Dictator and other Soviet leaders viewed the entire program as proof of American and British moral decay and a blatant, groveling attempt at appeasement. Clearly, it was Liechtenstein, one of the tiniest nations in Europe that Stalin had most respect for it was Liechtenstein, a country with no army and a police force of 11 men, that had the moral integrity to do what others did not dare. When the communists angrily demanded the return of all Soviet citizens within the little nation's boundaries for crimes against the motherland, Prince Franz Joseph II politely but firmly requested proof. When none was forthcoming, the Soviets quietly dropped the matter. Recalled the visitor, I asked the prince if he had not misgivings or fears as to the success of this policy at the time. He seemed quite surprised at my question. Oh no, he explained. If you talk toughly with the Soviets, they are quite happy. That, after all, is the language that they understand. Nor was such random brutality lost on the Germans themselves. When I was a soldier in France, I never had a chance to enjoy life and kick other people around as you do, complained one former Wehrmacht member to an American. We were strictly disciplined and told to be polite and considerate to the French. We lived with them in their houses and did not throw them into the gutter as you do us. We have learned our lesson, though. If there is ever a next time, you have taught us Germans what is permitted to a conqueror. Although some soldiers wholeheartedly embraced the non-fraternization edict with vindictiveness to satisfy even Eisenhower, many GIs and Tommies remained true to their better nature. Peter Fabian, a young artillery officer in the British division, recalled one day when a very distraught German mother rushed up to him. The frantic woman had run miles from her farm seeking help for her baby who had been terribly scalded in an accident. Without any authority or permission, Fabian quickly found an army physician, then stole a jeep, sped the doctor and mother back to the farm. Though terribly burned, the child survived. The next morning, Fabian was ordered to report to the commander. How dare you speak to the Germans? You've absolutely no right, growled the irate officer. Don't you know there's a law about that sort of thing? Next time you'll be in serious trouble. This made me very, very angry, recalled Fabian. So I retorted, well, now I know how you Christians feel about these things, but I'm afraid we have other standards. Ooh, the commander's face reddened, but he found no words. All right, he ordered, go. Fabian heard nothing more on the matter. Walking with his German girlfriend one day, another British soldier saw an all-too common sight approaching. A former Wehrmacht soldier shuffling along, ragged, gaunt, downcast, stepping smartly up to the starving man. The Tommy's indignant girlfriend cursed her countryman as a prolonger of war, then slapped the man across the face. Shocked, outraged by the act, the Tommy quickly apologized, reached into his pocket, gave the man a gift of cigarettes, then abandoned his heartless girlfriend on the spot. Such islands of humanity, tiny havens that they were, could not materially ease the dreadful conditions existing throughout Germany, nor could they ameliorate the vastity of human suffering. Throughout the summer of 45, the former Reich was still a land of troglodytes, with urban dwellers clinging precariously to their caves and cracks. After viewing for himself conditions in Hamburg, Victor Galland was horrified. Remember Victor Galland, right? The editor, he published Orwell, right? Homage to Catalonia, Road to Wigan Pier, and he also was crucial in Lovecraft being published in the UK. Very interesting. And he talks about living with the Germans, the terrible conditions in their home. And to his credit, he even said that they were being starved. Right. As Golan's made mention, one of the few relief organizations that dared face and fight the incredible suffering, regardless of Allied political pressure, was the Salvation Army. Yeah. The characteristic warmth and compassion that seemed all the more startling amid the crushing climate of hate and revenge. The charity dispensed food, clothing, and shelter. The Salvation Army ain't what it used to be, I'll tell you that. But enough respect to Victor Galland, right, who was a Jewish socialist. Just saying. Despite hundreds of thousands of American and Australian occupation soldiers using the comfort stations, right? The comfort stations. Wait, comfort women. Wait, I thought thousands more preferred seizing their sex violently. In the days, weeks, and months after the surrender, numerous atrocities were committed as the victors laid claim to what they felt was rightfully theirs. In the spring of 46, American GIs cut the phone lines in Nagoya and raped every woman they could get their hands on, including children as young as 10. Oh yeah, this happened. Oh yeah. In another city, U.S. soldiers broke into a hospital and spent their time raping over 70 nurses and patients, including one who had just given birth. The mother's infant was flung to the floor and killed. Male patients who tried to protect the women were themselves killed. In the same year, Australian troops in Kure routinely dragged young women to their jeeps and spent the night raping them in a nearby mountain. I heard them screaming for help every night, recalled the witness. In Yokohama, American soldiers grabbed the young woman off the street and drove back to the barracks. Once there, the kidnappers and I can't. You know, let me. I know 3 separate accounts of Allied soldiers bragging about raping women. These are stories told okay, by the younger relatives. 1 to James, 2 to me. Yeah, so go fuck yourself. All right. Japanese attempts at self-defense were punished severely. In one community, when local residents formed an anti-rape vigilante group and retaliated against off-duty soldiers. Yeah, good. Armored vehicles and battle array entered the streets and took away the ringleaders. All those arrested received lengthy prison terms. When the Japanese even spoke to one another about the massive rapes in the area, they were arrested, sentenced to hard labor for spreading rumors derogatory to occupation forces. Yeah, MacArthur. Of course, there was remember the one that they actually got revenge. They actually got the guys and got away with it. Remember that story? You probably don't. When you hear this Me Too nonsense, right, then you see this, right? What of them? Although she may have survived physically, how does a German, a Japanese, or Italian? Hey, obviously, there was so many things you could cover in what happened in Italy from the Allies, but obviously, how much can he was focused here, but and I'll focus again. German and Japanese female go back to being a normal person again after the shame of rape. How does a German school teacher return to her role of being a simple school teacher the following day, the following year, forever, after her entire class was forced to watch one afternoon? Well, how does a Japanese wife and mother go back to normal life? Being a normal wife and mother after husband and children were presented when a dozen Americans gang raped and sodomized her one night. The answer to all the above, the answer to all the above is, of course, never. Although these victims may have physically survived the war killed them spiritually just as thoroughly, just as certainly as any bomb, bullet, or bayonet. It has shaped my life as a woman, whispered one victim of gang rape. I have promised myself to stay alone. As a 15-year-old virgin was sexually assaulted repeatedly for weeks, one elderly woman long after the war no doubt spoke for millions of rape victims. I live with what happened to me, confessed the lady. There are days I cannot eat because of it. Even now, all these years later, I cannot even say that word. And yes, even all these years later, even the young victimizers, those who committed such terrible atrocities against helpless women and children, even they too found they were now victims of a sort, the victims of sleep-startling, nightmarish memories, of the daily non-stop torture of their own awakened souls. We were young, strong, 4 years without women, so we tried to catch German women. And 10 men raped one girl. There were not enough women. The entire population run from the Soviet army. So we had to take young 12 or 13-year-old. If she cried, we put something in her mouth. We thought it was fun. Now, I cannot understand how I did it. A boy from a good family. Although dirty Jap was the term most used, and although hate-filled propagandists like the above said they smelled and acted like animals, the typical Japanese soldier was anything but dirty or smelly. Even in the most filthy and impossible combat conditions, as numerous Americans attest, the average Japanese soldier or sailor was scrupulously cleaned and groomed. Another matter that was unimportant to the propagandist and the politician, but was extremely important to the fighting man himself, was something quite simple. One thing I'll say for the Germans, admitted more than a few Allied soldiers, they were better than we were with the enemy dead, buried them properly and neatly with their equipment over the crosses. I'll leave it with this. Rest in peace, Mr. Goodrich. And this is something that is I've seen all my life, okay? And you've seen it very recently, okay? When no one, now I'm gonna say no one didn't give a damn, but no one with any power gave a damn, and they crushed everyone who did say something, right? For the leftists have finally protested something legitimate, and look how quick they were crushed. Whatever. We Americans had the dangerous tendency in our international thinking to take a holier-than-thou attitude towards other nations. Why is that? We consider ourselves to be more noble and decent than other peoples, and consequently in a better position to decide what is right and wrong in the world. What kind of war do civilians suppose we fought anyway? We shot prisoners in cold blood, wiped out hospitals, strafed lifeboats, killed or mistreated enemy civilians, finished off the enemy wounded, tossed the dying into a hole, the dead. And the Pacific boiled the flesh off enemy skulls to make table ornaments for sweethearts or carved their bones into letter openers. We mutilated the bodies of enemy dead, cutting off their ears and kicking out their gold teeth for souvenirs, and buried them with their testicles in their mouths. We topped off saturation bombing and burning of enemy civilians by dropping atomic bombs on 2 nearly defenseless cities, thereby setting an all-time record for instantaneous mass slaughter. As victors, we are privileged to try our defeated opponents for their crimes against humanity, but we should be realistic enough to appreciate that if we were on trial for breaking international laws, we should be found guilty on a dozen counts. We fought a dishonorable war because morality had a low priority in battle. The tougher the fighting, the less room for decency. In the Pacific contest, we saw mankind reach the blackest depths of bestiality. Fortunately, the passionate, heartfelt words of Edgar Jones now speaks for millions more around the globe. Alas, if only such words as his could be emblazoned across the sky in fiery letters before each and every rush to war, and before each and every holy crusade, a color revolution, to slaughter an inhuman enemy, then certainly the world would be a happier, kinder, and better place of it. Well, Thomas, I guess you're wrong on that, but rest in peace. And thank you.